Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through some Week 13 waiver wire pickups.
Hike!
All right, Joe. So, being that it was Week 12 and all those teams are on bye, we do not have the best selection of the 5 players we're going to be talking about. We're going to do our best. First guy we're going to be talking about is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine of the Tennessee Titans, rostered 21%. Joe, this guy has been a touchdown machine, getting almost a touchdown every week since Week 6. The only one that he didn't was in Week 10. He didn't get a touchdown, but he had a good week this week against the Houston Texans. Ended up having a touchdown for 48 yards, 5 targets, 2 catches. So nothing, it wasn't a spectacular week, just a good week. But if he keeps on getting touchdowns, is it worth adding him?
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to put him on our list here, just because, I mean, you talked about that stretch where, 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games. And the last 2 weeks, too, I mean, he's had 6 targets and 5 targets. I know it's only counted for 2 receptions. But if that rapport keeps improving with Will Levis and he keeps scoring, he could be a good dart throw. A play somebody you could slap in your lineup. And, I know there's no bye weeks in Week 13. But in Week 14, there's another 6 bye weeks, and he gets Jacksonville. So that's also a good matchup that you could take advantage of if you got a wide receiver on one of those 6 teams on bye.
Well, and Jacksonville in the championship game too. He's got some really easy matchups. I mean, honestly, all the rest of the matchups are good. At Washington, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, at Indianapolis, and at Jacksonville. So we saw, Levis, they let him kind of throw around the yard today. Could be a good opportunity for Ikhine moving forward.
Yeah, I know you mentioned 22% rostered over on Sleeper, but he's only 7.5 rostered right now on ESPN. So he's widely available, and as long as he keeps getting those touchdowns, he's going to be a decent play for you.
Definitely a deep league ad. Would not be my number one guy of the 5 guys we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So next player we're going to be talking about is a homer pick, which is the Denver Broncos rookie receiver, Devaughn Vele. I had a good game against the Vegas Raiders, 9 targets, 6 catches for 80 yards. Could say, honestly, it was his most impressive game. It's interesting because at one time, for whatever reason, he just was, I believe, a healthy scratch, Joe, from Week 2 through Week 5. Was not involved in the game plan at all. Now he's starting to get more involved. Sean Payton had talked about him wanting to get more involved, just the rookies in general. We thought Audrey Gaston would get more involved. He wasn't as much. So it's a mind game when it comes to Sean Payton. Who really knows what the guy really is, what he's saying, whether to believe it or not. But what are your thoughts on Vele here, Joe?
Yeah, he's somebody that I like. And, over the last 3 weeks, it seems like, him and Bo are really getting on the same page. And I think some of his rise and why he had the disconnect early in the season, had a lot to do with Josh Reynolds. But ever since, Reynolds has been on IR. He's working his way back. But, Vele just seems to have a good rapport with Bo right now. I mean, he had 9 targets this past week, 5 and 4 over the last 3 weeks, had a touchdown against the Chiefs. And if this guy is able to find the end zone, he'd have an even bigger week. But he seems to be a good bet for yardage right now and right around 4 to 5 catches. And he's just shown to be a dependable guy. And when, Bo needs a play on 3rd down, seems to be looking Vele's way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, low percentage of FAAB here, 1 or 2%.
Absolutely, yeah.
The tough part is I think the main reason why you'd want him is probably a Week 14 bye for all those other teams on bye, but he's on bye. So I think that's a tough thing with him. But he's an intriguing ad. I mean, Sutton's the cream of the crop right now for the Broncos. I mean, who would have thought that he'd be doing better? I think is he outpacing even last season? I think he might be even doing better at this point.
I think yardage-wise, possibly, but the big thing last year was he had 10 touchdowns, which I know he's been doing better in the touchdown department of late, but I think 10 might still be a stretch for him. But I do think that right now he's on pace to eclipse 1,000 yards if he continues the same pace over the last few weeks that he's shown.
Next player we're going to be talking about here is tight end Noah Gray of the Kansas City Chiefs. Noah Gray has been on a burner these past 2 weeks, has had 2 touchdowns each of the past 2 games, marking 4 total. He had 4 targets, 4 catches for 66 yards. Is this a trend, Joe? I guess this is a tough one for me because I think this is kind of almost could be fool's gold because you see it, but he's starting to get more involved. Is this going to be something that we see going forward that Noah Gray is going to keep taking advantage of opportunities? It definitely seems like Kelsey, he has definitely taken a step back this season compared to any other season in his career at this point.
Yeah, I thought last week potentially against the Bills, his 2 touchdowns could just be fool's gold, but then goes out there and does it again in the Panthers. So it just made me put this guy on my radar, just like, not to say that he's going to keep getting those 2 touchdowns, but is this involvement in the Chiefs offense real? I mean, they don't seem to really have a dependable, go-to target yet. Kelsey, like you said, he definitely looks like he's taking a step back, or maybe they're trying to save him for the playoffs. Definitely Noah Gray's getting more involved. Xavier Worthy really just seems to be like a big play, almost like a gadget type player at this point in his career. And I know they got DeAndre Hopkins. But I mean, it just seems that Noah Gray could he become a dependable target in Kansas City? I think it could be possible.
Much more interest from a dynasty standpoint in him. Only rostering in 6% of leagues, which kind of surprises me because that means, from a sleeper standpoint, they obviously have a lot of dynasty leagues. You'd think he'd be more highly rostered. Maybe people just don't believe in him.
Yeah, they might not. I mean, it's probably most people that have him is probably like either a deep league or, Travis Kelce handcuff. But, on ESPN, he's 1.8% rostered. But I think, at the very least, you could stash him and just see if this trend does continue.
Next player we're going to be talking about, another tight end. Tight end Cole Kmet of Chicago Bears had a great game against the Vikings. 10 targets, 7 catches for 64 yards. Shane Waldron is no longer the offensive coordinator, and I believe it's now Thomas Brown. So is that we're starting to see Caleb Williams look a little bit better now. Is this something that we should start believing in?
That's why I'm putting him on the, I wanted to talk about him. Just because, I think with Thomas Brown there and no Shane Waldron, I mean, for whatever reason, they just were deciding like Cole Kmet would have these wild games where he'd be involved, and then all of a sudden he's not. I think that was a Shane Waldron problem. The Bears offense didn't look good, but I think Caleb Williams is looking better. The passing volume's going up, and I think for this upcoming week, they got the Detroit Lions. You can't really run on the Lions. I think they're going to struggle, so I think that the passing volume for Caleb Williams is going to increase. So I think it's a very chance for this upcoming week here, week 13. Cole Kmet gets a decent amount of targets once again.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to have Caleb Williams throw as many times as he did this past game, I'd say it's a good idea. I mean, everybody ate basically in that offense as far as the receivers go. I do think if Keenan Allen is out there, he's been a disappointment. He'd be kind of an interesting one as well. Only rostered, like we talked about, 51% of leagues for Cole Kmet. So I think it's definitely worth an ad. He's probably the one I'm most intrigued because this could be something that he starts to really build upon going forward in this last stretch of games here.
Yeah, when we know the talent's there. He showed it last year for whatever reason. Shane Waldron too, I think, wanted to showcase Gerald Everett in the rapport that he had, and Gerald Everett knew the offense, which kind of left Cole Kmet out there to dry. But I think that's all changing, and a lot of people, decent amount of people, have given up on Cole Kmet in ESPN leagues as he's currently sitting at 37.9% rostered. So I do think he's an interesting person to go out and add.
All right, so the last guy we're going to be talking about here, and this one might be a surprise to those, but hey, we warned you, right? This is slim pickings for Week 12.
Really
it's going to be running back Kenneth Gainwell, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, it was interesting, on Sunday Night Football. He did get a touchdown, 5 carries for 22 yards. He's obviously been, I mean, you can't even call him second fiddle, probably. He's the harmonica to the orchestra that's been Saquon Barkley. I mean, the guy is an MVP candidate right now. But Eagles are starting to create a decent amount of gap between them and now the Washington Commanders. It looks like the NFC East is really theirs for the taking. And if the Eagles can't, maintain the lead with the Detroit Lions, the number 1 seed might be out of the question. So I think obviously it's, Barkley, he has the tendency of getting injured. They've been utilizing him quite a bit. And who knows, maybe in Week 17 at Dallas for your championship game, maybe they decide to rest him. They don't try to use them, or maybe not use them as much, and maybe they'll start to use Gainwell. What are your thoughts there on Gainwell, Joe?
Yeah, I just think, as we've talked about stashes and handcuffs, I think Gainwell would be a really good handcuff if you're a Saquon Barkley owner, just in the event, like you mentioned, whether it's, they got their playoff spot, well in hand, they can't really improve their seeding, and they don't have much to play for at the end of the season, or if, God forbid, something happens to Saquon, with that offensive line and that offense, I just think Kenneth Gainwell is probably going to be a player you want to have. So I think it's better to be proactive. Get him while you could, get him on the cheap, probably for $1 if you have $1 minimum league. Maybe in some cases you could just snag him for $0, but I do think he's worth a stash and add, especially if you're a Saquon owner.
Now, do you think we're talking about him, obviously. Is there a consideration to be made for Will Shipley instead of Kenneth Gainwell in the event that, the worst happens?
I mean, I could see Shipley maybe getting mixed in, but as from what we can see, as far as opportunities in the game, week 7, he actually had 13 opportunities in that game against the Giants. So we're just seeing Gainwell get the most of the opportunities. And honestly, he's looked decent. He's got a nice burst as well. So I would be kind of surprised if they didn't stick with Gainwell, at least to be the lead back, but then maybe mix in Shipley. But I'd be surprised if they just completely ignored him and threw Shipley in there.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about a lackluster few players to consider here heading into week 13. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.